Welcome, Trio. Today we're going to go over solving radical equations. So a radical equation is any equation with a radical inside the equation. So in order to solve this, let's get started. So when you have the square root, you want to square it to get rid of it. So we have the square root of 6x minus 2 equals 4. But we need to square both sides to cancel out the square root. That gives us 6x minus 2. 4 squared is 16. We need to add the 2 to isolate the 6x. That gives us 18. 6x equals 18. We need to divide both sides by 6. To isolate the variable. That gives us x equals 3. Now, before you box your answer like I just did, you should always check to make sure this answer is a valid answer. So we plug it in. 6 times 3, that's 18, minus 2, that's 16. Square root of 16, that is 4. So this is a valid answer. Now, I will be back with another example. Thank you. Welcome back. Here's a new example. This one says 2 times the square root of x plus 5 equals 13. In order to do this problem, we need to isolate the radical and then solve for the variable. So in order to isolate the radical, we need to move the 5 first. So minus 5. This one gives us 8. Now, to isolate the radical more, we need to get rid of the 2. So divide by 2. You do it on one side, you have to do it to the other. 8 divided by 2, that's going to give us 4. Square root of x equals 4. So now, to solve for x, we need to get rid of the radical. In order to get rid of the square root, we need to square both sides. Four squared is 16. Now again, like I said last time, before you box your answer, you should check it. If I go back to the original, square root of 16, that's going to be 4. 4 times 2, that's going to be 8. 8 plus 5, that is 13. So this is a valid answer. I'll be back with another example. Thank you. Welcome back. We have a new example. This one says 2 times the square root of x plus 1 plus 2 plus 5 times the square root of x plus 1 equals 9. Now notice x plus 1 and x plus 1 are both underneath the radical. So we can consider this, instead of solving by isolating the radical, we can consider this as like terms. So 5 times the square root of x plus 1 plus 2 times the square root of x plus 1 is just 7 times the square root of x plus 1. Plus 2 equals 9. Now we can isolate the variable by minusing the 2. So now we can isolate the radical by dividing by the 7. And 7 divided by 7. Seven divided by 7 is just 1. Now we can get rid of the radical by squaring both sides. So we get x plus 1 equals 1. Solving for x, we subtract the 1 to get x by itself. x equals 0. Now 0 is a real number, so we need to check to see does it work in this case. 0 plus 1 is just 1. The square root of 1 is 1. Times 2 makes 2. 0 plus 1 is 1. Square root of 1 is 1. Times 5 makes 5. 5 plus 2 is 7. Plus 2 is 9. So this is a valid answer. We can box it. And I have one more example, and then we'll be done. Welcome back. Here's our final example for solving radical equations. Here we have the square root of t minus 5 minus the square root of t equals -1. Because we have two radicals on this side, it is possible for the equation to have -1 as a constant on the end. We just have to work it the way we always do by isolating the radical. So in this case, it's easier to always move the smaller radical. This radical has a binomial, this radical has a monomial. Let's move that one. So adding square root t plus square root t square root t minus 5 equals square root t minus 1. Notice I put the constant at the end. That's going to make it more easier to work with later, which is right now. Because now that we have the radical isolated, we need to get rid of the radical by squaring both sides. Okay, so here we get just t minus 5. Now when we square the binomial, it becomes a perfect squared trinomial. So that means we square the first term, that just gives us t. We multiply these two terms together and double it, that will give us -1 times root t is negative root t, and double it makes -2 root t. Then we square the second term. -1 times -1 is just +1. Now we have one radical left. We need to isolate that radical. So we can move everything over and leave the radical on this side. Minus the t. We get -5 equals -2 square root t plus 1. Move the 1. We get -6 equals -2 square root t. Getting rid of the -2, we need to divide both sides by -2. So -6 divided by -2 equals -2 square root t divided by -2. We get 3 equals square root t. And if you prefer, you can rewrite this as square root t equals 3. It doesn't really matter. We still need to get rid of the square root by squaring both sides. T, 3 squared is 9. And before we box it, we should check. Square root of 9, that's going to be 3. 9 minus 5, that's going to be 4. Square root of 4, that's going to be 2. So 2 minus 3, that does equal -1. So this is a valid answer. And we're done. Thank you. Go Trio!